So thank you everyone for who's logging in and joining us today. My name is Ariana Ali and I serve with the Baha'i Publishing Trust. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Wilmette Institute's webinar entitled, What is Baha'i Literature? A Youth Experiment, a collaboration between Young Writers Endeavor, the Baha'i Publishing Trust, and the Wilmette Institute. As many of our viewers know, the Wilmette Institute is an online educational institution providing university and extension courses dedicated to the building of a new society through transformative education. Our interdisciplinary courses aim to develop the capacity of participants to contribute meaningfully to the current discourses of society, exploring both spiritual and material dimensions of our collective advancement. Our educational endeavors, including courses, certificate programs, and webinars, aim to inspire a commitment to social transformation, drawing upon a Baha'i conceptual framework in the areas of community building, social action, and contributing to prevalent discourses. Just a few announcements before getting started. Looking ahead to July, we have one extension course starting on July 17th, the World Order of Bahá'u'lláh Selected Letters, and another course is being offered on July 24th, Sustainable Development and Human Prosperity. For more information and registration, please visit the Wilmette Institute website. And now we are ready to get started with today's webinar, noting that it is live streamed on YouTube and accessible later on SoundCloud, Amazon Music, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. We hope you enjoy the program and invite you to share it with others. During the presentation, you are invited to post questions in the Q&A section, which will be addressed at the presentation. So please feel free to post any questions that come up throughout the presentation in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to them at the end. I have the pleasure to introduce the webinar for today with two young writers who will introduce themselves shortly. Lapitan and Nasim Mansuri explore the leanings gained over 5 years from facilitating a Baha'i-inspired writing workshop for teens called the Young Writers Endeavor. Through this experience of how literature can be used to build Baha'i identity while accompanying other writers and observing our creative lives and service can bleed into one another. They will explore these glimpses of the new era of literature that Shoghi Effendi spoke of, and the crucial contribution every writer can make to furthering the cause of Baha'u'lláh. Ron and Nasim also share what they learned from other writing spaces in discourse and service, and explore the role writing can play in a new pattern of community life. So with that, I am going to pass it over to Ron and Nasim. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thanks, Ariana. Thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you to the Wilmette Institute and to Baha'i Publishing Trust for giving us this opportunity to share with you all today. We are going to be, as Ariana mentioned, talking about the Young Writers Endeavor, which is a writing workshop that we've been doing for 5 years now, and also just sharing some of our learnings from our personal experiences as writers in the Baha'i space and the professional space. And we just wanted to note before we started that all art in this presentation was made by Young Writers Endeavor participants or facilitators, so feel free to feast your eyes on all of that. And if you want to see the art anywhere else, you can find it on Instagram. So to start us off, we did want to mention the fact that although it's Ron and myself presenting today, there's really a large body of people behind us who have been contributing equally to this process, from our organizing team, Hope, Jackson, Oliver, Kiara, and all of our participants and their families who've been supporting us for so many years. And at the same time, many professional writers or professionals in the art space who are Baha'is have also been contributing to our workshop all this time. To introduce myself, I am Nasim Mansuri. I'm a writer and editor, a chemical engineer. I've really been working in both the writing and science spaces for some time. As a writer and editor, I've been able to publish pieces on different platforms. I would say the most relevant one in this space is Baha'iTeachings.org, which I had the bounty of working at for many years. And now I am running a company along with another Baha'i that does writing workshops for professionals, word conscious.
Hello, friends. I'm Ron Lapitan. Professionally, I'm a fundraiser at the Tahrir Justice Center, where we support courageous immigrant women who are survivors of human trafficking, forced marriage, and other forms of domestic violence. And on the side, I'm a writer and a comic artist. Glad to be here with Nasim. To give an intro, the Young Writers Endeavor is a workshop we do annually to work with youth to build their powers of expression through the literary arts. Each year during this workshop, we deep dive into different literary media, including journalism, short stories, poetry, comic art, and theater scripts. And then the youth we work with create original pieces of writing for each of those media. We also use this workshop as a way to build Baha'i identity, and we try to align it with things that are happening in the Baha'i world. For example, during the one-year plan, when we were all thinking about the meaning of the covenant, we were encouraging the youth in our workshop to use their literary pieces to explain what is the covenant or what is the significance of Abdul Baha. During the #OurStoryIsOne campaign, we were encouraging our youth to learn the stories of the martyrs and use their art to create expressions of that. We see this Young Writers Endeavor workshop as responding to a few needs. One, creating a space for the youth to develop their creative use of the arts to an extent not being done in other Baha'i spaces. Two, building Baha'i identity, especially for youth in isolated communities for whom this workshop is a rare experience of being part of a youth cohort. And three, using the arts to extend our capacity to reflect and grow. To give a fuller picture of what a year looks like at the Young Writers Endeavor, we are a global group of youth between the ages of 12 to 18, as well as a team of older youth participants from 13 plus different countries that have been meeting across 5 years. We use Zoom, Discord, and Google Classrooms as our platforms. In March, we do a taster experience to the full workshop, which we call the Fast Family Festival. The facilitators and youth meet for 2 mornings during the month of fasting to support each other, especially because a lot of our youth are fasting for the first time. And we use that space to have really honest and frank conversations, both youth to youth and youth with parents, about a topic related to the arts and identity. In July is our full workshop experience, which is a 3-week intensive where the youth learn about 2 to 3 different literary media. For each week of the workshop, the youth do assignments that are written by us, the facilitators, to deepen on aspects of the craft. And then they create and present an original piece of literature for that medium. Each week also features a guest Baha'i professional who teaches us about the industry. But these spaces were created during quarantine, and they really thrived during those years where we were inside and needed virtual spaces to be with people. And now as we get further from that moment, and as the Baha'i world continues to encourage the decentralization of spaces, we're thinking creatively about new forms that Young Writers Endeavor as a community can take to continue intensively exploring art and literature.
So we wanted to touch on some of the inspiration and the learnings that we've gained over the years from this workshop. One of the main quotes that we keep returning to is this quote by Shoghi Effendi. It is certain that with the spread of the spirit of Bahá'u'lláh, a new era will dawn in art and literature. Whereas before the form was perfect, but the spirit was lacking. Now there will be a glorious spirit embodied in a form immeasurably improved by the quickened genius of the world. So this is really like a basis for why the Young Writers Endeavor started in 2019. We really wanted to explore what that new era looks like. We began very focused on writing, and it's kind of expanded to incorporate all the arts in some way, because writing is always at the heart of them in some way. And so one of the main things we wanted to discuss was this idea of escaping maybe the traditional framing of Baha'i literature. There is sometimes a view that, I believe I struggled with when I was young, and other people as well, that Baha'i literature is really, history books, analysis of the writings, the Ruhi books, but maybe we can expand that definition a little bit more. And so with the youth of the Young Writers Endeavor, we've always discussed seeing how far we can really go with this idea of Baha'i literature. Is all literature Baha'i if it's Baha'is writing it? Like, how can we elevate everything that we write to create this body of work? So we wanted to share with you a few different examples of ways in which the youth's work has begun to give us some glimpses of that new era. First, we wanted to share this panel from Layli's A Rainbow's Promise, which is a really beautiful comic. As you can see, a lot of work put into the visuals. And it's really about the covenant, on the year that we talked about the covenant. And at the very end, you can see this main character, Paige, is having this reflection that there is an unspoken promise between my dog and I. When I adopted Hunter, I made a promise to him that I would always take care and never hurt him. And then the dog is reflecting, thinking, right? Because he's a dog, he can't say it out loud. And I made a promise to Paige that I would always love her, just as God does for us. So it's really this back and forth that really mirrors the relationship that we have with God, that we thought was so sweet. At the time, she was a junior youth. And so it's just very, very sweet to see how through art, the junior youth are able to share these very complex concepts with each other. Another look at that in fiction is in short stories. Anissa and Naya wrote a collaborative story about a girl who sees this other girl walking home every day. And so it's just, the main character comes to this conclusion that she has to befriend this girl. And it's very sweet. It's written very much at the age of 12 or 13 that they are. It conveys so much emotion, and also conveys a lot of the principles that are studied in junior youth group books of friendship and community building. Another look at that is this article by Kiara. Kiara is now a facilitator, so part of our organizing team, but at the time she was in the first cohort as a participant. And so she wrote this article about the Baha'i activities in this community that she was in Kenya. And it's really beautiful to me. The opening of the article really mirrors the opening of many of the documentaries that the Baha'i World Center has been releasing, where it really just paints a picture of what the community is like, what it looks like, what it smells like. It's that beautiful, the rough dirt path, the grass, all these like sensations, and then moving into what are the Baha'is doing in this community? How has it had an effect over time? And so that's yet another different way in which this literature is illustrating the world for us. And then we have this panel from a comic by Asiya that is really, to me, it's such a shareable meme. It's just this character saying, when you said feast, I thought you meant food, which I think is something that all Baha'is can joke about. And it's really, it's Baha'i literature. It's jokes that Baha'is are doing for Baha'is. Another thing we wanted to talk about was the idea of exploring difficult questions with transparency. Something we've always wanted to do in this space was to really allow young Baha'is to explore their identity and feel free to read the writings, to come to their own conclusions about what they're learning, and to create art based off of that. And so we really felt that in order to do that, we had to be open to questioning, to that, have that transparency with questioning, and make people feel very safe in exploring these concepts. So we have a few examples here of exercises we did. At one Family Fast Festival, we had people in breakout rooms over Zoom, working on this little diagram, which starts at the center, right? If that is who I am, and I have all these different layers, how does my identity factor into every one of these layers? And so each group of youth just did this. We had 12 to 18. And so they did this without a facilitator. They filled in what they felt. And so you can see everything, right? The spirit, soul, health and body, your personality, your nationality, your values and morals. And then we work out to pineapple on pizza, milk or cereal first. So it's a nice insight into the sorts of ideas that we're exploring. We also did this other activity that was anonymous response, which we really enjoyed because we just asked everybody to answer this question anonymously while we were on the call together. And the question was, where are you on your spiritual journey? What truths are you looking for? And so we see a big variety of how different people are approaching their journey. And, starting at the age of 12, one person says, because they're 12, I get to understand my spiritual journey. I'm looking to be honest, kind, and patient. I really need to develop those 3 qualities. Somebody else says, I'm trying to make myself feel more hungry for spiritual things. The pandemic made it hard to be in those spiritual spaces. I feel like I've become more distanced from those habits. I'm trying to figure out what will help me connect with God, which I think is something we can really relate to and is so honest to see it written out so eloquently. Somebody else says, I would say my spiritual journey has just started. I've only started to really look into it, how it should affect my life and how it currently affects my life. They began to research the writings and set aside some time for it, which is, that part of our lives where we start to explore these questions. And then somebody else says, they feel very firm in the faith, and then also say, I'm looking for memes for the meme gods. They must be satisfied. So, we have this beautiful mix of very heartfelt, very profound thoughts that people are sharing with each other in these spaces, whether there's facilitators or whether it's in their friendships. But at the same time, we have good humor and it's still a group of youth.
Another important element that contributes greatly to the power of the Young Writers Endeavor experience is the importance of nurturing community. So I often think about how this workshop as an educational experience feels different from school. In school, learning often feels like it's just the means to the end of getting good grades and passing. So the experience can feel very soulless. Like when a student asks a question, the question is, do I have to know this for the test? And then right after the test, they forget the math concept or the science equation because it has no bearing on your sense of yourself. At Young Writers Endeavor, we have rigorous assignments, but we have no grades. Our goal is to learn how to develop and refine our creativity to become the Fate's future communicators. And because of that, the experience is full of soul. When one of our youth asks a question, it's a question like, when I share something I wrote for an audience, how do I not feel afraid? Or what even is the covenant, and how do I explain that in a way that's both simple and beautiful? And then the facilitators and the youth will have these long, heartfelt discussions on Discord about it. Here's some more anonymous feedback, which I think really shows the quality of the growth experienced in Young Writers Endeavor. Before, I was always hesitant to write the faith into my stories because I want my stories to target everyone. And I know not everyone will understand or get it. Now, I'm more willing to include the faith. And then another participant wrote, I'm going to write more stories and poems because I feel more inspired to write now. I would like to, someday, write articles for Baha'i teachings, and I'm starting to do that now with my article going to editors. So because the motivation is so deep, the friendships made are also deep. For example, 2 of our youth became such close friends that they hosted their own writer's workshop for their local community. Here on the right, you can see a screenshot of our group Discord where the youth have this game of Would You Rather that's been going for several years now. Here at Young Writers Endeavor, we're also always trying on new ideas of what Baha'i-inspired literature and art can look like. For example, one of our youth, Layli, the same artist behind the comic with the girl and her dog from earlier, she wrote this essay about her summer of service experience, which is when youth volunteer a whole month of their summer to do full-time outreach. And for half of it, she was just talking about navigating her mental health, even though the story was about being assisted by confirmation in the path of service. In the center here, you can see this comic by our friend Noura, which is a reflection of all her feelings of confusion with everything happening in the year 2020 and how she reconciled that with the hope that comes from the Baha'i framework. Here in the bottom right is a comic by our friend Yukino, which is about her anxiety giving presentations on Zoom. So she drew herself as this nervous bear giving a presentation about Abdul Baha to us, the Young Writers Endeavor workshop, and then quickly switching herself back to mute. By the way, Yukino is a friend of the faith. And then one of our participants, Shayan, once made a podcast episode where he interviewed his junior youth group, and then they gave him these really vulnerable and genuine perspectives about what it feels like to be their age in a world that's on fire. We'd actually like to play you a short snippet of this podcast so you can see just the caliber of work that our youth create in this workshop and the passion that goes into it.
You're too young to understand. I'll tell you when you're older. Kids shouldn't worry about the world. They should just do their schoolwork and focus on having fun. These are some phrases we've all heard at some point or other, and the parents among us may have even said themselves. We entertain kids with drawing and let them entertain themselves running around and gossiping. As a society, we view kids as incapable of controlling themselves, understanding complex social issues, making decisions for themselves, or seeing the reality of things. But what if kids are smarter than we give them credit for?
I'm Clarissa Heffer, and I'm 12.
So I often think of all this as a new art movement in Baha'i literature. Another way that I often reflect that this feels different from school is that in school, when a teacher asks a question, the answer is silence and crickets, because grades celebrate first try success and then penalize making mistakes, which is exactly the thing a person needs to do to learn something new. So instead of feeling comfortable just trying messy things, a student only raises their hand when they know the answer already on the first try. And I think Baha'i literature often absorbs a lot of this. In our desire to present the faith as perfect, we present ourselves and the characters we write as surrogates of the faith to also be perfect. We know the answer from the beginning, we have no blemishes, and thus we have no journey. And then neither Baha'is nor our friends can see ourselves in this art. This here is a quote by the Universal House of Justice on describing art as a means for consolidating understanding and as a vehicle for the learning process. And that for me sounds a lot like the kind of art our youth are learning to make. We may serve a perfect cause, but we ourselves are always not knowing what comes next, making messy mistakes and tripping over ourselves in the process of trying to be true Baha'is and striving to build this world we've never seen before. And our art should be allowed to express the messiness of that learning process. This picture here is a comic by another friend of the faith, Lily. It's about that prayer that says, "Make me as a leaf whose movement and stillness are both determined by thee." So the facilitators of Young Writers Endeavor in our own lives outside the workshop are also doing our own messy learning about how to use writing for discourse. Nasim and I are going to share some ways that we experiment with writing. I do a lot of informal journaling about learning experiences that I have on the path of service, and then it ends up on my social media. For example, this one year I captained a summer of service team, and then I wrote this really long essay while my team was sleeping before I woke them up to do outreach. And it was about not only the transformation happening in our neighborhood as a result of our effort, but also just how being in leadership over these youth was causing me to look in this mirror of all my insecurities. And then I'll post something like that with all the messiness and the rawness of it. It's very personal writing. I'm not writing for an audience. I'm writing solely for myself and my own reflection, but I'll leave it somewhere other people can see in case it's interesting. And it's proven a really good conversation starter and prompt for reflection in my local community. Some friends share they even take these stories to institutional meetings to read them and talk about them. And this one mom was telling me that while we're striving to build this world we've never seen before, it's comforting to read literature that's honest to that piece about not knowing, even while acknowledging that we are being guided in a divinely inspired process. I'm also a comic artist and I draw comics for Webtoon, which is like the YouTube for comic artists. Like artists and their audience can interact in the comment section. So one of my series, I'm a Baha'i, Ask Me a Question, it thrives on this two-way conversation. I'll wait in the comment section for someone to ask a question, and then the next episode I draw is the answer to that question. Some episodes in this series include, what does your faith condemn? Do Baha'is date? And does your religion support the LGBTQ plus community?
Another interesting experience that I had was being able to serve in the capacity of somebody who is recording learnings for other communities. I had the opportunity to travel to Colombia and Panama and also do this for some communities, you know, on a virtual level, I guess, with helping record the learnings that they're having in their communities so that they can be disseminated, whether it's to institutions or to other communities so that they can learn about what's happening. So you can see some pictures here of a community in Colombia where they were being interviewed, children's class teachers, coordinators of the sequence. However, we know that in this current framework of not being so centralized, it really doesn't do that much to have one or two writers around the world trying to record learnings for everyone. What we're really trying to do is to empower every local community to find a way to record their own learnings and to disseminate them in a way that works for them. And we're also just exploring, what do we do with that, right? Like, what is the way in which we're compiling these learnings? Are we putting them in a big library? Are we sharing them? It's not very clear to us because we're so early on in this process. As Shoghi Effendi says, right, we're too close to it to be able to see exactly where we're standing. So it's really interesting to be able to explore these questions. And last year, I had the wonderful opportunity of organizing a workshop for members of some institutions and agencies in the Americas to start to think about this process and how are we as Baha'i serving in the grassroots, creating documents that really share that reality, that current reality, and paint that picture. So some of the questions that we explored were very technical. You know, what format? Are the people in our community able to just read 5 pages worth of report? Or are we best served by trying to do illustrations or trying to do just some short excerpts that are shared? Is social media the way? Is a WhatsApp voice recording, which sometimes is more friendly for a lot of people, particularly like older people or people who are very busy, so they can just hear it. And also, how do I take notes? How do I interview? How does this fit into the daily processes of our activities? How do we record this moment in history? Another thing that we were looking at was, how do we capture a community's voice? something that I feel like I've seen and have felt the urge to do to myself is whenever you're writing a report, anything that is, feels a little important because it's the Baha'i faith, you kind of fall into this urge to imitate the tone of the House of Justice or of the guidance in general. And that doesn't make a lot of sense because we're not that institution. And so are we really capturing the voice of our community, the unique cultural aspects, and elevating that to really be, the voice of our culture uplifted by the teachings of the Baha'i faith? So these are really interesting conversations that we're starting to have, starting to explore what comes of that. We're so early on in this process that it's really new to all of us. We also wanted to mention a few different alternative outlets, I would say, of how this writing can interact with both the Baha'i world itself and the external world, the wider world. One of the examples that I've had in my personal life has been able to publish articles that are not on Baha'i platforms, but are focused on Baha'i concepts, right? Like the concept of God in movies, or breaking cultural barriers through the use of, new accessibility like subtitles. Being able to include these concepts that are very informed by my relationship with the faith in something that's really outward facing, something that's being clicked on by people who are just fans of a TV show, is really helpful. And it's very empowering to have those meaningful conversations online. It's part of our process as trying to contribute to discourse. At the same time, websites like Baha'i Teachings that are writing articles to be able to reach people who have not heard about the Baha'i faith or have heard about it and want to learn more with articles that are designed for them. Or Baha'i blog that is writing articles for Baha'i so that we can share in those learnings that other communities are having. Here we included an article by Asiya, who is one of our Young Writers Endeavor participants from the very first year. She was able to publish the article that she wrote at the Young Writers Endeavor at Baha'i blog. Another thing I've included here is this excerpt from something Ron drew. This is actually something that we shared at the workshop with adults that was in the previous slide, because we just felt that it was really interesting. I think sometimes we have this idea that, first of all, that every meeting has to be recorded in a very specific way as a report. In this, Ron basically recorded everything that happened in his meeting in comic form on lined paper that he had on hand during the meeting. I think that that is a really clear illustration that we can really express our moment in history in many different ways with the materials that are available to us. It doesn't have to feel like a fancy process, and it can come out way more beautiful than if we'd tried to print it on fancy paper. And then I just also wanted to give a shout out to, I guess, some of the Baha'i pop media that we're seeing arising around us. I really like podcasts. I really have enjoyed seeing what Podcrushed with Nava, Penn, and Sophie have been doing, and also Rainn Wilson's new podcast, Soul Boom, as a result of his book. It's really interesting to see how these different media pieces are able to capture a lot of our meaningful conversation points that we are doing in the grassroots in a space that's, more, it's much wider audience. And it's a mix of, bringing our identity as Baha'is very unapologetically, but also being able to do so in a way that's accessible to everyone, that is very transparent about our own weaknesses. It's not claiming to speak for the faith, but in sharing that journey of investigation, we're able to also invite other people to investigate this truth with us, which at the end of the day, that's the point of literature, right? Going back to the Young Writers Endeavor, some of the things that we're recently trying to experiment with is the development of materials. How can the materials that we have been putting together over what's basically been 4 months of work every year of prep for our workshop, how can we make that be useful to more than just the circle of people who are able to make it to our Zoom workshops every year? So we've started experimenting with material like a workbook for articles, a workbook for comics, If you scan that QR code, you can have access to that Google Drive. You can always contact us for that. We really want to learn, like, how does this look? How can these materials be applied to core activities in our communities, to groups of young writers, whether they're youth, children, or adults? We've tried to structure them in kind of a wide enough way that you can really use them in any way you wish. But in a way that is fun and interesting and profound, and that we are trying to capture that vibe that we have with our actual workshop every year. So if you do that, please let us know what your experience with it is, and we're interested in continuing to experiment with this. We're really trying to allow ourselves to be open to change. As many Baha'i-inspired projects, rise and then fade away maybe when our needs change as a community. We're trying to see, what are those needs? Are we meeting our reality where it is? Are we really in line with the guidance? And how can we best put our efforts in the field of the arts, in the field of grassroots community service together, so that they're coexisting and supporting each other? So some takeaways. We're really trying to learn how to build that coherent creative life, which I think for every Baha'i is challenging. The reason the Young Writers Endeavor began really was through personal reflection. I remember being 12 and being really into the arts and really not having many Baha'i peers with whom I could share that with. It didn't feel like necessarily your writing and the faith could exist together in a space, just because there wasn't one that was accessible to me at that time. And I've been lucky enough to have such a big support network, both within the faith and outside of it, to be able to build that into a career and into my service. But for a lot of people, 12, 13, 14, the last ages where you wrote a lot of poetry or drew a lot, and then it just kind of faded away and you focused on what you were really going to want to do and didn't really find a way to combine it into your service or into your work in whatever way you wanted to do so. So we're trying to find ways that you don't have to leave that behind. How can our body of Baha'i literature, our Baha'i spaces, really nurture that love for art in a way that contributes to society? And everybody can make that contribution, no matter what age you are. We're trying to learn to build that pattern of community life, and finding out, where does art fit in that pattern that we've been learning so much about.
And one thing we didn't want to be a takeaway of this presentation was, wow, look how awesome this thing the youth did is. Youth are the future. Because this was never about asking youth to do one more thing. As Nasim said, it's about reflecting, how do each of us and our creativity contribute to being the voice of the faith? So moving away from what the youth can do towards what curiosity, expertise, and experiences can we each lend to the process? And in line with that, we'd like to end with some questions for you. What spaces are you hosting? What content are you publishing? Are you collaborating with other writers, Baha'i or not? What questions have you been too nervous to explore? Where's the gap in Baha'i content, and how can you fill it? In what ways does what we write fit into the daily life of a Baha'i community and the wider community? If you'd like to contact us or see more of our incredible youth's art, these are our social media channels. Thank you so much for listening. And with that, we will give it back to Ariana to take questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ron. Sorry, let me get my camera back on. Thank you, Ron and Nasim, for your wonderful presentation and for sharing so much information about this incredible initiative, the Young Writers Endeavor. So again, I just wanted to say, if anyone has any questions at all, feel free to post them in the little Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we can try to go through any questions that have arisen. Let me take a look at what we've gotten so far. I see we have one question from his friend who says, if we were to create writing workshops in our cluster, how would the junior youth or youth be able to be a part of what you do at the Young Writers Endeavor?
So anyone can be a part of the Young Writers Endeavor as it is. You can follow us on our website, our social media. We're always putting out news on our next events. Really what we're trying to do is create that community. So in whatever way people are able to follow us, if they want to have, access to the materials, we're always happy to share that with you. Really, we're all trying to learn from this process. So whether somebody comes to the workshop or can't come to the workshop, but wants to look at the materials and figure out a way to do it, if you want to have a call with us, we're more than happy to learn about it together, because this is something that we're all trying for the first time, at least in our local communities.
Wonderful, thanks. Ron, did you have anything to add to that question? Or
I guess I'll just say again that there's one slide in our presentation with a QR code where we actually took the materials that all of the youth facilitators developed together. One of them's about journalism, one of them's about writing comics. And you can use that QR code to actually get a copy of the materials that any youth in any of your communities can use. And like Nasim said, if there are youth that want to have a call to just like talk through with us what it looked like when we were using it, what it could look like when you try a version of it for your own local community, we would be very happy to do that.
I can also share the link here in the chat. I believe that I can do that. And then you can also see that, I think. Let me know if it doesn't work.
okay, thank you. We also received a comment that says, I'm thrilled to learn about this initiative. I am the new editor of the American Baha'i magazine, and I'd like to run an overview story and publish some of the youth's work. So I think Nasim and Ron, maybe that's for you and for the participants to consult about. I'm sure we can share contact information. So you can get in touch with the American Baha'i and see if there's, something we could share with the wider community for friends who are not able to join this
That
Zoom.
sounds awesome. Reach out to us, and we'll also try and reach out to you. Thank you.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, I can connect you all together so you can be in touch with the American Baha'i about that. Okay, let's see. We have a question that says, what advice would you give to young writers?
I mean, my advice would be to keep writing and keep trying to find that community. I feel like it's, I've had a lot of different nurturing writing communities. It started out really outside of the faith with different groups of writers working in different online spaces. And it's turned into being able to also find my colleagues who are Baha'i, friends who are Baha'i, who are also writers. And I feel like that those friendships that we make are really a very strong basis to be able to maintain the habit, to be able to push ourselves to new writing challenges. So I really benefited a lot from that. I don't know, Ron, what about you?
Yeah, this reminds me, one time when we were teaching about drawing comics, the first assignment our youth had was they had to take their sketchbook or notebook, they had to destroy the first page, like scribble over it, tear it up, and then they had to send us a picture to prove that they did it. And it was to teach them not to treat this sketchbook or notebook as something sacred where you have to be perfect on your first try. So my advice is embrace that messiness, use your writing as a place to try messy things, because that's how you discover things that are cool. Like you won't discover it on your first try. And to echo something Nasim said, find a community of friends that share your passion to write with. I think some writers and artists think that like the process of creating is this lonely thing. I think I thought that before Nasim invited me as a facilitator of Young Writers Endeavor, and I've just learned that it's so much more of a transformative and inspiring experience if part of that is seeing all the beautiful things your friends can create and what excellence looks like in the way your friend interprets a creative challenge, you know?
Yeah, it's a way of pushing ourselves that and it isn't competitive at all, which I think is a big fear at first. It's like, oh no, if I see what other people are doing, I'm going to feel so incapable. And I think once you're able to push past that, it's such a beautiful collaborative space to be able to do that. And I do want to be clear, you know, we obviously want you to come to Young Writers Endeavor, but there's other spaces as well, whether they're Baha'i or not, where you can find those people. You just kind of have to keep trying.
Yeah, you know, one of my favorite parts of the Young Writers Endeavor workshop is on Sunday of every week when the youth have finished their original pieces, we'll do a call for all of them to share it. And just seeing like the way people smile and the joy people have of seeing what their friends created during the week. For any youth that go on to try this in your local community, I really hope that ends up being part of your experience. Like just the joy at the end when you show each other all these cool things you made, you know?
Thank you. So we have another question. Do you have ways to support older writers as well? Maybe you have some ideas about that.
We've been trying to find ways. We've been experimenting for a couple years now. We started a group chat called Creative Peers. It's kind of had its ups and downs. I think it's a little bit easier to organize events when it's like there's a small core of us for a large population of people, because you just feel a sense of responsibility. And then when it's for ourselves, it's a little bit harder to maintain the sustainability of it, like month to month. But we really wanted to create a space like that. And I think that's part of what we're now consulting about as the organizing team with some of our participants as we move towards a more decentralized approach and focus a little bit more and figure out what format is what works for us. How are we going to support each other in a sustainable way and also invite older people like us to participate, or people older than us. But I think it's been nice to get that experience, at least within the group of facilitators, because we've kind of seen each other through many stages. I think when we started, the two of us who started were both in college at the time. Now, you know, some of us have kids, some of us are married, some of us are just moving on to different aspects of their careers. And so it's been really nice to see that growth and also see our participants becoming facilitators who are now in college. So I think that's seeing how that collaboration works and how we've been able to help each other and seeing each other's art has been really nice. So if you're interested in collaborating with us with the workshop, let us know. If you'd like to be added to whatever group it is that we're trying to form, please also reach out to us. Our website has the contact information. You can just fill in the box.
Yeah, I'd also just like to shout out a lot of our workshop participants that are in the audience and asking some of these questions. We see you, we love you, and some of these new spaces we may be experimenting with may take into account that like you are no longer the young youth we started working with. You are now like peers producing art that's at the same caliber of Nasim and I. And it will just be really inspiring to see what
Definitely better than.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, agreed.
Okay, thank you. Lots of good ideas. Okay, we have another comment and question. It says, thank you for this exciting and important initiative. Communicating the concepts of the faith with youth through graphic novels and comics is brilliant. My question is, what platforms do you think are most effective for publishing such literature? particularly for Baha'i youth?
So I mentioned Webtoon. That's the platform I publish my comics on. It was actually shown to me by one of my junior youth, because it turns out to be like where a lot of junior youth and people younger than them are both publishing their original art and doing a lot of their reading rather than like print books. So for that aspect, I would say that's a good place for writers to learn how to like draw comics. I also see like a lot of comic artists just like publish for Instagram, you know, and stuff like that. But if you want to publish in print, you know, Baha'i Publishing Trust has told me they'd be very interested in that, especially from a youth perspective, because that is something that is lacking from their catalog, you know, graphic novels for peers of your age. So yes, I think all of these things would be great for comic artists to explore.
I would also say if you're an adult asking this question, I would say it's good to just ask the 14-year-old in your life, what are they looking at? Because I mean, I'm quite young still, and I'm already losing track. And so it's really helpful to just speak to a good 14-year-old who'll ground you and put you in your place on what social media they're actually using right now, because I feel like it changes very fast. And there's definitely a lot of, you know, promo through like social media, word of mouth, I would say. But I definitely don't want to, at least, you know, whenever I speak, I don't want it to sound like, you know, we're not reading print books, because we are. I think youth are definitely reading print books, or just hearing about them online. And so in what way that marketing is happening really would have to be in line with what other young adult writers are doing. But I think it's a really interesting thing to learn about, just because, yeah, we don't have a huge amount of that in the Baha'i community. And I think a lot of what I have seen when we're like trying to write is this challenge of like, how do you write something that's very gripping and that doesn't feel like very patronizing? So I'm really looking forward. I've seen, like, I think through the professionals that we've collaborated with, we've seen some really interesting like graphic novels, people like Aaron Smith, Aaron Emmel, who are doing some incredible work in the space of like comics. But also, I mean, I really loved the volumes like the Bahá'u'lláh books. I think there's also a series of the Ba, but as a kid, I had the ones of volume 1, 2, and 3 of Bahá'u'lláh history that had a lot of different stories in it. And I would love to see more of that style of things also come to light.
Thank you. And yeah, I will echo what Ron said, that Baha'i Publishing Trust is always happy to hear from anyone with submissions or ideas for projects. Feel free to get in touch. We're happy to have a conversation. And let's see, another question that has come up. What changes did you see in the youth as they developed their art?
Ron, I feel like you had some really good reflections in this area.
Yeah, so one of them is confidence, you know, like in the early years, you'd have a participant that was asking that question in Discord. On Sunday, when we share our work, can you tell me how to just not feel afraid of it, you know? And then the next year, that will be like the confident person during Share Sunday. And you'll also see them get bolder in the things that they try in their art, more comfortable with being vulnerable, exploring those things like your mental health while you're in an intensive period of service, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think that although we shared a lot of, you know, a lot of the art that we share on social media and our presentations is, I mean, you've seen it, very beautiful. We also have like stuff that maybe is a little bit more out there, like, you know, because the youth are exploring a lot of different concepts related to identity, our moment in history, politics, right? And that's definitely not absent. I think it's the art that they're creating, asking these questions, is very beautiful and very profound. We just don't always share it because we don't necessarily share everything that is created at the workshop. But I definitely think that it's really interesting to see how that how those concepts, you know, grow more complex over time. And I think for me, it's been really encouraging to see the youth get more bold in the way that they talk about different concepts, and even just like art like the one that Ron shared in the presentation, just because it makes me feel more free to really ask the questions that I have for my writing and not feel like I have to provide an answer for it. I can just ask the question.
Mm. And also just to see like how much more refined and sophisticated the way they make art becomes over years. Like, for example, one participant will draw a 4-panel comic in the first year, and the next year it's this multi-page comic, and the formatting is so much more sophisticated, and the storytelling. And I really like that, because I think in religious art, there's this tendency to create low quality art, and as an audience you can tell, wow, this thing was, they didn't care about creating a good piece of art, they cared about using art to preach to me in a way that they thought would reach me because I happen to like to read comics, you know. But if you can create art that says the thing you care about, the faith, and also if you took that out, it would just be a quality good piece of art. I think like that would be an evolution in Baha'i art, and I think watching our youth grow from year to year has like shown me glimpses of that, you know.
Wonderful, thank you. So, sounds like you guys originally started during the pandemic, right, as a virtual space. What are your thoughts or plans for the Young Writers Endeavor, you know, going forward in the future, or maybe for other communities and groups that would like to start something similar? You know, is in person the best way to go? Are youth still interested in virtual spaces? What have been your experiences or thoughts going forward, or for others?
That's our big question right now. I think we started a year before. So we actually started on Zoom before the entire world learned about Zoom, because it was 2019. So we had like this tutorial on how to use Zoom, and we had this tutorial on how to use Google Classroom. So we were so stressed that the parents are going to freak out that they didn't know how to use it. And then 2020 rolled around, and everybody came into the workshop already knowing how to use all these tools. So that was pretty great. So 2019 was really, it was a smaller cohort, but very active even before the pandemic. I think there was really, at the time, an absence of virtual spaces for international like gatherings. And so Hope the other facilitator who co-founded this, we really drew a lot from experiences in other online international groups like forums, like the olden days of LiveJournal, to create this sort of writing space. And they had a really great response. And I think obviously 2020, 2021, even 2022, I don't know, even the last few years, we've had like 30 plus signups every year, which has been really nice. I definitely feel like 2020 and 2021 were stronger because there was a little bit more of that framework. Like people were very used to doing that, and it just worked very well with the rhythm of our lives. Really, the reason why we're thinking of in what way we transform the space, maybe we evolve the space, isn't necessarily because, you know, we want more participants or we feel like we can't get enough. It's more because our numbers are, I would say, it's kind of the same. It's not fluctuating that much. But we really just want to make sure that we're able to create a space that's supporting the current goals of the plan, and that feels very in line with all the other things that the youth want to do. Like in the Northern Hemisphere with their summers, they want to go on summer of service, they want to do ISGP. How are we fitting in our program in a way that supports these things, encourages these things, and hopefully feeds those things. So that's really something we're exploring among the facilitators and with some of our participants who've joined that conversation. And we're still in that series of meetings. So once we know exactly what it's going to look like, we're definitely going to be sharing that. But we're still excited. I think it's a little difficult sometimes to make a change because you got so used to it and your heart is really into this particular structure that we work so hard to create. But I think just the exercise of, as a group, really reflecting on our goals and how we want to meet them, and for the participants also to reflect on where they're at, like how do they want this to go, has been very empowering for us. And also just to really, for me, I think it's kind of been an exercise in obedience, even like when we know what the house is asking of us, like we know that we're being asked to pour all of our energies into our communities. And so it's not about it just being a comfortable course where I just write and draw what I want to. It's like, okay, I have to push myself a little harder. How does this feed directly into the betterment of the world? And still stay fun, obviously.
Yeah, I just want to appreciate that, you know, Nasim has this sensibility for always including the youth in everything, including these discussions about if we change form, what form is it going to take? So we are having those meetings with our participants, and for our participants in the audience, check Discord, because we're still having those meetings. If this cool, awesome community we have is to change form, we want your input on what form it takes. So yeah.
Okay, great. Another question has come up. What are some ways to include the faith in art without being preachy? Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a big question, right? I feel like I feel like I've felt this the most in like writing articles in like a journalism space. But I think I can always tell when something's being marketed to me. I mean, I don't think I actually can, but I always feel like I can tell. We're always being marketed to, but I don't want to feel like I'm selling the Baha'i faith to someone when I'm writing. And I think that that's sometimes a responsibility we somehow take on instead of really just trying to tell our own story. And I think that can be a little difficult because your own story isn't story of a perfect person and the Baha'i example for your entire community. And I think that that's something that we individually have to grapple with in any art that we make. I've been in some really interesting conversations as well with other Baha'is in study circles, in ABS spaces, like what can we be sincere? Like, can we be sincere about our journey, about our identity, about all of these different factors? Because I think we're so used to, you know, leading spaces that sometimes it feels like you have to put on a certain facilitator mode when you're writing as well, which I don't think is really effective when we're trying to share the message.
Yeah. I often think about art like the door-to-door conversations we have when we're doing neighborhood outreach, where you need detachment. You know, if you're standing at the door and the person can feel that you're attached to whether or not they fall in love with what you're saying, they're going to feel the weight of this duty and mission you've given yourself, and they're going to close themselves to that. But if you're just there being absolutely in love with what you're saying and talking about, and you're in love with the action of being there at the doorstep saying it, and whether or not they fall in love is a second thought, I think that's when the person is more likely to be attracted to what you're saying, you know? So that's my thing, like, just be in love with your action of creating art. And then I think that, you know, people will see and feel the prayer in the quality of what you've made, and that will be very attractive. And then the other thing I'll say is like humility, you know? Like there's this story where this kid asks Abdul Baha, why do all rivers return to the ocean? And he said, the ocean puts itself below everything, so everything is drawn to the ocean. And I think that same humility like applies to art. Like I said, you don't have to write something that presents yourself as perfect or that makes someone feel by the end like, oh, I've learned about the Baha'i faith, now I have all the answers. Or, you know, even in our community building life, everything we've learned and experienced is very much at its infant stages. We don't have to present it as being more final or more solid as what it is. Like, we can present the infant thing and say, this is transformative, but it's only the beginning, and I can still see this gap of things I don't know. So yeah, don't be afraid of that humility in your art. That will also be very attractive, I think.
Yeah, if people want to find flawless truth, they can go to the Kitab-i-Agan. Like, it's already there. It already exists. You know, I think if we can just write and not be afraid, like not feel like it's our job to answer the question. I think there's value to asking the question. And the conversation that comes out of that is just as interesting as anything else.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, those are some great points. I think, friends, we are going to wrap up now. We've come to the end of our presentation and question answer session. So thank you so much to Ron and Nasim for sharing all your learnings with us today. Thank you for the participants for joining us, and to the Wilmette Institute for hosting this webinar. Friends, if you have any more questions or interested in future events, please visit the Wilmette Institute website. You can subscribe to the Wilmette Institute newsletter. Nasim and Ron also shared, you know, you can visit the Young Writers Endeavor website or their social media accounts and pages. And you can find Ron's work on Webtoons, I believe. So there are lots of resources to check out online. And with that, I think we are going to say goodbye, and thank you, and have a wonderful weekend to everyone. And hopefully we will see you all again at a future event.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thanks
having
for
us.
listening.